Direct News TV. June 7, 2023. Russia-Ukraine war, Zelenskyy tours NATO states before key summit. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy is on whistle-stop tour of NATO states before the Western Military Alliance meets in Lithuania next week for a key summit. Later on Friday in Turkey for talks with his counterpart Recep Tayyip Erdogan, Zelenskyy is likely to discuss the Black Sea grain deal and prisoner exchanges. Russia labels HRHF group undesirable. Russia is banning the Human Rights House Foundation, HRHF, an Oslo-based non-profit group, accusing it of creating social discord. HRHF is a coalition of 80 independent human rights organizations advocating for freedom of assembly and expression in the Western Balkans, the Caucasus, and Eastern Europe, including Ukraine. The Russian Prosecutor General's office said it was declaring HRHF's activity undesirable, amounting to a ban, because the group aimed to destabilize the domestic political situation in Russia, discredit its foreign policy, and shape public opinion about the need to change power in an unconstitutional way. It also accused the organization of discrediting the Russian armed forces. Russia must not endanger nuclear plant, UK. British Foreign Secretary James Cleverly said Russia must not further endanger the safety of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant. The IAEA must have full access to inspect the plant and ensure nuclear safety and security, he said on Twitter. IAEA chief says he is pushing for access to power plant roofs. The head of the UN nuclear agency says he is pushing for access to the roof of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant in Ukraine following accusations that Russia had planted explosives there. Finishing a 4-day visit to Japan, International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, Director General Rafael Mariano Grossi said his agency was making progress on access to the plant, but there had been some limitations. "It's like a conversation and I'm pushing to get as much access as possible," Grossi said, in an interview with the Associated Press in Tokyo, adding that there was marginal improvement. Grossi also told the AP that experts had gained access to the cooling pond and fuel storage areas, where they confirmed that there were no mines, which Ukraine had previously claimed otherwise. Still, gaps before Turkey approves Sweden's membership, NATO chief Stoltenberg says there are still gaps to bridge for Turkey to approve Sweden's NATO membership bid. During a press conference ahead of next week's NATO summit in Vilnius, the alliance's Secretary-General said he would meet Swedish and Turkish leaders on Monday, the day before the meeting. Next week's summit should give Ukraine a clear path, Slovakia. NATO's summit next week should give Ukraine a clear view of future membership in the alliance, Slovak President Zuzana Čaputová said after hosting Zelenskyy in Bratislava. Čaputová told a news conference alongside Zelenskyy that Ukraine's membership was a question of when, not if. Zelenskyy says he expects unity at NATO summit. Zelenskyy says he expects unity among NATO member states at next week's summit in Vilnius. He added that he wanted concrete steps in Ukraine's path to joining the alliance. Speaking at a joint news conference with the Slovak president, the Ukrainian leader said he also expects the NATO summit to discuss more defense packages for Kyiv and security guarantees. NATO prepares $545 million aid package for Kyiv. NATO is preparing an additional €500 million, $545 million, aid package for Ukraine, its Secretary-General, Jens Stoltenberg, says. NATO countries are preparing a new emergency package of assistance to Ukraine, including fuel, spare parts, medical supplies, demining equipment and pontoon bridges, for €500 million, Stoltenberg said at a news conference in Brussels. Stoltenberg added that the alliance has also provided Ukraine with assistance in the construction of military hospitals. Zelenskyy arrives in Slovakia. Zelenskyy has arrived in Slovakia and met with President Zuzana Čaputová as he continues a tour of several NATO states to raise support behind Kyiv's bid to join the alliance. The Ukrainian president arrived in Slovakia after talks in the Czech Republic and Bulgaria over the past 2 days, and he is expected to travel to Turkey later in the day. He is expected to discuss the situation on the front lines and at the NATO summit on Tuesday and Wednesday in Lithuania. Slovakia has been one of Kyiv's staunchest supporters and is one of the few allies to provide fighter jets to Kyiv, handing over 13 Soviet-era MiG-29 planes this year. Ukraine welcomes cluster munitions, says official. A senior Ukrainian official said Ukraine would welcome the delivery of cluster munitions from the United States because they would have an extraordinary psycho-emotional impact on Russian forces. Undoubtedly, the transfer of additional volumes of shells to Ukraine is a very significant contribution to the acceleration of deoccupation procedures, presidential political advisor Mikhailo Podolyak told the Reuters news agency. Especially if we are talking about cluster ammunition, which is undoubtedly capable of having an extraordinary psycho-emotional impact on already demoralized Russian occupation groups. Earlier this week, 3 U.S. officials, speaking on condition of anonymity, said a weapons aid package that includes cluster munitions is expected to be announced as soon as Friday. Human rights groups oppose the move. Leaders will come together to bring Kyiv into alliance, NATO chief. NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg says NATO leaders will reaffirm that Ukraine will become a member of the alliance and also discuss how to bring Kyiv closer to this goal when they meet in Vilnius next week. For nearly 500 days, Moscow has brought death and destruction to the heart of Europe, Stoltenberg told reporters in a news conference in Brussels previewing the summit. Our summit will send a clear message: NATO stands united, and Russia's aggression will not pay. Kremlin says will closely follow Zelensky-Erdogan talks. The Kremlin says it will closely follow upcoming talks between Zelensky and his Turkish counterpart Recep Tayyip Erdogan, describing their meeting in Istanbul as important. We will very closely follow the results of these talks, Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov told reporters. It will be interesting for us to find out what was discussed. It's important, he added. At least 6 people killed in blast at Russian factory. At least 6 people were killed and 2 injured during a blast at an explosives factory in the city of Chapyevsk in central Russia, state news agency TASS reported. TASS said the explosion happened as pipework was being dismantled and that there had not been a fire. Alexander Kinstein, a member of parliament for the Samara region, said the blast appeared to have been caused by welding and might have been the result of explosive remains being left in the pipes. Since Russia invaded Ukraine last year, there have been numerous blasts or fires at fuel depots, factories, railway lines and other infrastructure inside Russia. Authorities have attributed some of them to Ukraine and others to pro-Ukrainian saboteurs. Russia's budget deficit narrows in June. Russia's budget deficit for the first half of the year is 2.6 trillion rubles, $28.4 billion, narrowing in June as spending fell and revenues increased. During the same period last year, Russia posted a surplus of 1.48 trillion rubles, $16.2 billion. However, supporting its military campaign in Ukraine and dealing with Western sanctions on its oil and gas exports have hit the government since then. Defense spending has kept Russia's industrial sector ticking along, spawning forecasts for economic growth this year and helping Moscow to continue its conflict with Kyiv. Wagner Group paid no visit to Barracks, Belarus. A Belarusian official tells reporters that no one from the Russian Wagner Group has visited the camp President Alexander Lukashenko offered them since the mutiny ended. Asked if Wagner had come to look at the site, advisor to the Belarus defense minister, Leonid Kaczynski, said, "They have not come, they have not looked." Under the terms of an agreement brokered by Lukashenko to the rebellion last month, Wagner chief Yevgeny Prigozhin was supposed to move to Belarus along with his fighters who did not sign with the Russian Defense Ministry. Kaczynski also said that the 300 tents put up at the disused cap were for an exercise, not for the Wagner Group. On Thursday, Lukashenko told reporters that Wagner's founder, Yevgeny Prigozhin, had visited Belarus briefly but was now back in Russia. What are cluster munitions? According to senior U.S. government officials, on Friday, the Biden administration is expected to announce that Washington will send cluster munitions to Ukraine as part of a new military aid package worth $800 million. As a signatory of a convention against the weapons, Germany has already said they will not send cluster munitions and that it is not an option for them. Human Rights Watch has also urged the U.S. not to send the weapons. But what exactly are cluster munitions, and why are they so controversial? My name is Kingsley. Please like, share, subscribe and hit that notification bell so you can be the first to be notified whenever we post. You won't regret it.